At Lowe's, get up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, members get free delivery, install, and more when you spend $2,500 on select major appliances. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 2/25 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. Excludes Massachusetts, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Florida. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Visit Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change.
Visit your nearby Lowe's on East 17th Avenue in Hutchinson.
If you want to be more consistent, you're in the right place. I'm Elizabeth Benton. Welcome to Consistent, a podcast by Primal Potential that is for all of you who feel frustrated by your lack of progress or overwhelmed by all the change that you want to make in your life. Here, we stop frantically chasing new habits and start strategically building a structure of consistency. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Primal Potential Podcast. I am Elizabeth Benton. Thanks so much for joining me for the first episode of 2026. And one of the primary changes that I am focused on in 2026 is way less input, which is a little ironic because I'm a podcaster who loves podcasts and I love books and I love information and I love technology, especially the way that it allows me to connect with people that I'm not physically proximal to. But I want to get really personal with you guys today. I mentioned last week on the show about how I asked myself this question around feeling frustrated with my frustration with my children. And I asked myself, like, hey, what's driving this? What's going on here? Why am I finding that I'm quicker to frustration with my kids than I want to be? Why do I feel like they're irritating me more than I'm enjoying them? And certainly I love them and I enjoy them and they're wonderful, but I was just in a season of irritation and frustration with them, which no doubt is influenced by the fact that my twins are 3 years old and 3 is tricky and 3 times 2 is trickier. But I asked myself this question, and one of the things that came to mind was my cell phone. And if I'm listening to a podcast while I'm cooking dinner and then the kids come tearing through the kitchen, I'm way more likely to be annoyed in that situation than if I'm not listening to anything and I'm just fully present in cooking dinner and being a mom. That prompted me to once again look at not just my cell phone use, but just overall input. Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, email, text messages, you name it. Now, here's what kind of surprised me. And this is where it gets personal. I've told you guys a million times that a couple of years ago, I feel like it was when things started to settle down after my twins spent a few months in the NICU. I got hit with what felt like postpartum anxiety, and I've on and off wrestled with that for the past couple of years, and there's been seasons of great improvement and seasons of great struggle, and I've looked at every angle from diet to sleep to light exposure to supplementation. I've even had a number of conversations with medical professionals and therapists about traditional medication, which has never felt right. What I did not really look at was this idea of where modern anxiety comes from. And the truth is, it's this artificial exposure to constant input, especially from social media. And I kind of felt a little stupid when I started to put these pieces of the puzzle together because I'm like, I've changed my diet, I've changed supplementation, I've changed sleep, I've changed light, I've changed this and that and the other thing. But I never really linked my anxiety to podcasts and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all these other things until now. So I went down the rabbit hole, and today I want to talk about it. And I also want to share some of the changes that I'm going to be making going into 2026 and how I believe that this relates to systemic inflammation and body weight. Because I am kicking off on Monday this 4-week Impact Inflammation group. If you have not joined it, I would love for you to, because inflammation is at the root of every chronic disease and also mental health disorders like anxiety and depression. Okay, let's talk about modern anxiety. Modern anxiety is dramatically influenced by the constant artificial exposure to input, especially from social media. And here's why. Social media exposes your brain to unnatural levels of stimulation. And honestly, I shouldn't even call it social media because it's not just that. It could be the 24-hour news cycle. Now, I have not had the news TV on in my house since 2020, but people are seeing the 24-hour news cycle in their Facebook feed, in Instagram, on the news app on their phone. So even if you're not a TV watcher, like I'm not, we just were not built to handle this level of stimulation. Our nervous system was never designed to process 14 horrific stories in 5 minutes. Or how about this one? Our nervous system, our brains were not designed to constantly feel left out of parties or milestones 24/7. You know, we didn't used to know when our friend across town hosted a party that we weren't invited to. But now we can see not only people we know, but people we don't know. It might be not that you're feeling left out of a friend's birthday party and you didn't get the invite. It could be that you feel left out of a whole way of living because you can see how strangers live in a way that you never could. And it's this constant nervous system assault of, I don't have that. I'm missing that. Oh, I need to worry about this. I remember over the summer, I saw this story on probably Facebook about a teenage boy who passed away from basically like surfing off the back of a boat. And I never considered that you could get carbon monoxide poisoning on a boat. And then after I saw that story, I saw several other stories in a matter of days about children and teenagers who passed away due to carbon monoxide poisoning off a boat. Now, new fear unlocked. I had never considered that. And that's one example of something that happens to a lot of us almost every single day. And our brains were not designed to process all of this. Process global outrage, process tremendous grief of not just one situation, but 14 situations in less than an hour, every day, forever. And so what happens is our brain, in an attempt to protect us, because it doesn't know that this is just like social media catastrophe and not personal catastrophe, your brain goes into this like chronic low-grade alert mode, hyper attuned, always scanning for threats because it sees a threat here and now another threat here and now another threat on your Facebook feed and another threat on Instagram and another and another and another and another. That's modern anxiety. And it is not only exhausting, it absolutely can chip away at our health, our physical health and our emotional health and our spiritual health. This isn't just psychological, it's also chemical, right? And there's a lot of chemicals in our brains at play here with this onslaught of information, onslaught of fear. Just this morning, I saw this story. I saw two stories in a matter of the 3 to 5 minutes I allowed myself on social media about this deadly strain of the flu, right? Everything is designed to provoke tremendous fear. And a child died of it, and this is so unique, and it's causing lung damage in small people, and I've got 3 small people in my care, right? Well, there's a number of things that are happening chemically when we see this. And it impacts dopamine, it impacts oxytocin, it impacts cortisol. All of these are impacted by digital overexposure. And they all have direct links to both anxiety and inflammation. Remember, inflammation is the starting point for nearly every disease that we know of. Let's talk about dopamine first. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. Think of it as like the seeking signal, right? It's not a pleasure chemical as much as it is an anticipation seeking chemical. And so whether it is chronic scrolling or it's the 24-hour news cycle or all of the above or always having to listen to something and be in your ear, what happens is it trains your brain to expect constant stimulation. It's reinforcing this loop of constant checking and scanning, texts, email, news, social media, notifications, and your brain's getting flooded with dopamine without real fulfillment. And several things happen as a result. First, we become desensitized to dopamine. Your dopamine receptors become less responsive. So then you need more and more and more and more and more. You desire more and more and more and more. You also end up with a lower baseline level of dopamine. And so without notifications and checking and scrolling, everything kind of feels flat. And so you're always seeking and searching and needing more of your phone in your hand. Like, I can't just sit here and look at my family. I have to be scrolling or checking or responding. And then you end up stop finding joy in things that used to bring you joy. Your kids playing or having a meal with your family or getting a hug or being out in the sunshine, because you have to layer. You're constantly seeking and scanning. You become deeply uncomfortable with stillness. And that becomes anxiety, right? Because your brain sort of goes into hyper-arousal mode when things slow down and you're looking for something, right? You get stuck in that seeking or that scanning mode. Did I miss something? And that could just be a notification, or it could be a threat. And that dopamine dysregulation feels like emptiness or a need to escape or fear or obsessiveness. But that's not all. There's also this oxytocin layer. Oxytocin is your connection chemical. You probably hear about oxytocin when you hear about like a new mom and nursing her baby releases oxytocin, or snuggling her baby releases oxytocin. It's the hormone of warmth and presence and trust and belonging. And what this constant scrolling, seeking, nonstop media cycle does is it actually prevents oxytocin release, right? We don't get a release of oxytocin from likes on our post or from direct messages. It reduces the time that we spend in real connection with other people, right? When we're constantly in this seeking, searching media cycle, we don't have as much eye contact with real people, as much touch with real people, as much shared laughter with actual real people, not memes and text messages. And so when there's less oxytocin, there's less of a safety signal. And that means your nervous system stays in this state of threat, even if everything is okay around you, even if you're in a peaceful environment, even if there is no actual real threat. And a lot of people, when there's less oxytocin, they feel more alone. They feel unseen, like they're emotionally starved, even if they have a lot of people around. And that can turn to panic, loneliness, irritability, emotional reactivity, right? If you have low oxytocin, you're on shaky ground. You're going to feel unstable, unsafe, disconnected, even if there is no logical reason for it. It's a hormonal thing. And that's not all. There's also this cortisol impact of this onslaught of input. Cortisol is designed for like short bursts of action, not 18 to 24 hours of micro stress. But that's what a lot of people live in. And I want to say not all people. If you were to look at my husband's social media, I think I know his algorithm is entirely different than mine. And his is like inappropriate jokes all day long. We joke about that, but he also does have a lot of like political unrest stuff. And he's just not as sensitive to it. And I think that there's that individuality factor. I am much more emotionally sensitive than my husband. I think in part because I'm a woman, in part because I'm a mom, and I have that like nurture and protect thing turned on in a different way than he does. And I think because we process hardship very differently. And though he too lost our daughter Dagny, and she passed away in 2020, and he too went through our girls being in the NICU, I had a very physical experience with that, and his was not physical in that, like, I carried these babies, and after Dagny died, my milk was still in, and all of these different things. But also, we had different actual experiences of that, because I rode in the ambulance with Dagny, and I was pulled into the OR before he ever arrived at the hospital while she was, on the table, and all those different things. And so we have to remember too that what impacts one person one way, the very same set of circumstances will impact another person a different way. And so this cortisol effect, 18 to 24 hours of micro stress after micro stress after micro stress, impacts my sister differently than it impacts me, impacts my husband differently than it impacts me. So we all do have different degrees of sensitivity to this. What this onslaught of input does, this digital or media overload does, is it exposes us to endless mini stressors, whether it's headlines, bad news, notifications, comparisons. Guys, even think about just one element of, say, bill reminders. It used to be before email and before online banking that you might check your mail once a week and go through the bills. But if you're somebody who's under financial pressure, you might get 20 reminders in a day of financial stress because of the text message, bill reminder, because of the email, late payment reminder, because of this, that, and the other thing. Your system never returns to baseline. Cortisol is always high. Then that's just one thing. Then you add in the headlines. Then you add in, even things that I think can be very powerful. Like I'm in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of women from my church. That can be really, really powerful, but it also can be part of this unhealthy exposure where maybe 3 times a day, somebody is sharing really bad news of people that you know or you care about, or people who are related to those that you know and care about. Your system never gets a chance to go to baseline, and cortisol is always elevated, always in this like, something's wrong, this is bad, stress, 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 and your body is tense and hypervigilant. This disrupts sleep. It can disrupt blood sugar, digestion, recovery. It contributes to systemic inflammation, including inflammation in your brain, which can drive anxiety and depression, impair emotional regulation, inflammation in your gut, immune system challenges. It's kind of a shitstorm. However, we have the ability to change it. Now, I think I shared this with you guys before that sometimes my brain goes to, well, I'm an online business owner and I'm a podcaster, so I just can't get off social media. First and foremost, that is entirely untrue. I know a lot of people who do not have a social media presence, but they do have an internet presence. The other thing is, I could absolutely hire somebody. If I didn't want to eliminate my social media footprint, I could hire somebody to do it for me. When I decided I need to get serious about this and I need to stop relying on this, well, I can't, because I started to look at what it could look like for me. For example, I can use digital tools without them using me. I can post without scrolling. Hey, what do you know? I can post without scrolling. And I know most people listening to this aren't necessarily online business owners, but maybe you feel like you need to be on Facebook for your kids' school, or because that's how you keep in touch with your cousins or your in-laws or whatever. You can use digital tools without them using you. But that's not just an idea. It has to be a strategy and or boundaries that you put in place. So I created some for myself. And I'm sure they will be ever evolving and I will be highly imperfect, but I can pursue improvement without perfection, as can you. So one of the very basic boundaries I put in place is no input before 8:30 in the morning, which might sound super, super early, but I wake up around 5:30. And typically, one of the first things I do is look at my phone. Now, in fairness, I do that to see the time, but it doesn't stop there. Then I'm on Instagram while I'm going to the bathroom, or I'm checking text messages, or I'm opening up a podcast and listening to that while I make the kids breakfast. Not anymore, right? I can empty the dishwasher, make breakfast, have my breakfast, be with my kids, and not be on my phone until 8:30 in the morning, all right? There's also the opportunity for me to create more white space. Now, let me tell you how I've talked myself out of this before. There is no white space in my life. I have 3 toddlers. If I go inside, if I'm not on my phone, it's not like I'm giving my brain a break because I'm getting, yelled at about this. Mom, wipe my butt. Can I have some water? Can we play Spot It? Whatever it is. But it's not about the need for quiet white space as much as it is about the need for less digital intrusion. So instead of pursuing this like meadow moment where I can sit outside by myself and soak in the silence, which I think is very healthy if you can do that, for me personally in this season of life, it is about doing what I'm already doing without digital intrusion or with far less digital intrusion. So things like intentionally creating spaces without digital intrusion, folding the laundry without listening to a podcast, preparing dinner and leaving my phone upstairs, right? Not taking my phone into the bathroom, things like that. Now, I've already done things like probably a year ago, I took Facebook off my phone, which I think is great. Instagram doesn't work so well on the desktop, but I always have Facebook open in my browser. So I've closed it. That way it's harder to just, I can easily click over to the browser right now and hit refresh and then scroll through and see, 8 sad headlines. No, I'm just going to keep it closed, and I'm only going to open Facebook if I have to post something for work. And if you are following me on Facebook, I very rarely post things on Facebook for work. So I'm looking at, number one, having some of the morning time free from my phone, intentionally creating time without digital intrusion. And I'm going for at least 3 cumulative hours throughout the day, not including that first block in the morning, without digital intrusion. So leaving my phone in the kitchen while I'm in the living room with my kids, leaving the phone upstairs while we're doing bedtime stuff, and don't get me wrong, I'm not scrolling on Instagram while I'm putting my kids to bed, but my phone is usually on me, right? Just creating more space. And it might look totally different for you. The challenges might look totally different for you. Your thing might be TikTok. I don't even have TikTok. Your thing might be Pinterest. Pinterest isn't a big time suck for me. You might be a YouTube short person. But if you are somebody who struggles with tension, anxiety, depression, inflammation, this is a huge opportunity. What we can expect to feel with less digital intrusion, less irritability, a calmer body, more physical freedom in our body, like your chest might open up, your shoulders might feel less hunched, it's not to mention tech neck. You might have fewer headaches, certainly more patience, better sleep, reduced anxiety. That's the big one that I'm in it for. Also, just more satisfaction with the life that you have, less of this insidious sense that you're missing out on something. Now, this plays into the bigger overall pursuit that I'm bringing into the new year of reducing inflammation and driving weight loss. And I am going to be fully pulling back the curtain on what that looks like for me in a 4-week Impact Inflammation group. It's just a private Facebook group for 4 weeks. I'm going to share recipes, meal ideas. I'm going to be sharing my process, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, everything from nutrition to workouts to supplementation to lab tests and everything in between, really diving deep into what inflammation is and isn't and how it's unique person to person and what we should talk about with our doctor and how we should talk about it with our doctor. If you have not yet grabbed your spot in that 4-week group, we start on Monday, January 5th. I'll put the link in the show description. If you have any questions about it at all, let me know. And let me know your thoughts on this episode and if you're going to make any changes and what those changes are, because I think it's really powerful to surround yourself with people who have similar goals so that we're supported in it and we don't just drift away when we have a bad day or we get discouraged or it starts to feel less urgent or important. All right. Happy 2026, everybody. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for joining me for today's episode. Remember, there's no podcast that will change your life or your habits. The difference maker is what you do with what you've heard. I have a free workbook to help you do just that. Head to primalpotential.com/consistency-questions to download a totally free workbook with 20 questions you can ask yourself to help you build a structure that supports consistency that's aligned with your lifestyle, your preferences, and your most compelling excuses. primalpotential.com/consistency-questions. And also feel free to email me, Elizabeth@primalpotential.com, if I can help or support you in any way. I'll see you on the next episode.